Today is the 4th of January, 2020. It is the 1600th hour of the day. It's cloudy, 32 degrees, and a couple of inches of snowfall last night. I want to touch on a couple things before I reach my destination here. Trump ordered an airstrike on an Iranian general that's in Iraq. Now, I cannot pretend I am the world's most knowledgeable person on geopolitical issues. But I know this much, and this is what I want somebody to understand. Islam was founded about 600 years after Christ. So basically, 2,000 years ago, roughly speaking, Jesus was born. He was born under the reign of Augustus Caesar, under Imperial Rome. And he died 33 years later. He was crucified on the cross. Real short span of time. The Roman Empire has come and gone. About 600 years after Christ, Muhammad comes onto the scene out of the Arabian Peninsula. Now, all the people, pretty much in the Middle East, in that particular region were tribal people. They were Bedouins. They were pagans. Okay, they were worshiping a moon god, and they had all kinds, and they were tribal. They were extremely tribal. And that area was a giant sandbox even back then. And what happened is, Muhammad claims to have gone out on top of a mountain. Muhammad was illiterate, by the way, in case you didn't know this. And he had a visitation from the angel Gabriel. If you don't know who Gabriel is supposed to be, I'm not going to give you a biblical lesson in that. Look it up. And Gabriel supposedly gave Muhammad some sacred texts that are the divine word of Allah, and there's no other word from Allah but Muhammad. And unlike Christianity, and you need to understand this, Christianity was never meant to be spread by the sword, even though it was often used. It was often used as a geopolitical tool. It was also used to unite people. But it was never meant to be spread by the sword. It was never meant to be something forced on people. It never was. There's nothing in the New Testament that speaks of Christ wanting to force people to fall under his authority. That is supposed to be a choice. That is supposed to be a personal choice. And everything that he talked about, particularly even after he left, was about love. Love your enemies. Do good to your enemies. Turn the other cheek. Everything Jesus talks about in so many aspects is totally opposite of human nature. It's totally opposed to human nature. Everything is supposed to be about love and acceptance. And if people, you're supposed to walk away from people that are, if as much, there's a word that says, as much as it's dependent upon you as an individual, be at peace with all people. As much as it's dependent on you, that doesn't mean the other person. And there comes a time where you brush off the dirt off your hands and your feet and you walk in a different direction because you cannot walk in peace with everybody. Islam is different. Islam goes on the warpath about 25 years after it arrives on the scene. And Muhammad uses this to unite these tribal Bedouin people. And it goes on the warpath. And it never stopped. So 625 AD, it goes on the warpath. It never stopped. It went through the land. And if you don't know the Quran, if you haven't read it, you really need to read it. You really need to read the stuff that's in there. There's nothing in there about peace. It's about forcing people to subject themselves to the will of Allah. You're supposed to submit, because that's what Islam means. Islam means submission. You're supposed to submit. If you don't willingly submit, you are supposed to be killed. That's what Islamic texts say. If necessary, you spread it by the sword. You're supposed to spread it any way you can, even by deceit and lies. That's how it's supposed to be spread. So the Middle East is Islam spread throughout. It even got into Eastern Europe. It's still there. Because during the Middle Ages, it spread, it took over. Christianity was already well established throughout the Middle East. It was established basically because of the Apostle Paul. Paul went on these missionary journeys throughout the Roman Empire, and he established churches, particularly in Turkey, in what was called modern-day Turkey now. It was where Christianity first was born. When Islam came and it went on a rampage, it swept over the land like a firestorm, and it never ended. It never ended. And the reason it's such a political hotbed, it is because of Israel. Because the British owned what they call Palestine, and after World War II, the Jews basically bought it. Jewish people from around the world took collections and bought the land from the British Empire, and they reestablished Israel as their homeland, despite there being other people groups in there. And the Muslim communities that surrounded it, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, went freaking bonkers. And they launched two wars after it was in 48 and 67. They launched two wars into Israel, and the Israelis beat the hell out of them. If you have never read what happened to the 6-Day War, and I forgot what the other one was called, with the Arab states surrounding it, it's damn near miraculous what happened. It's something that really needs to be read by people. How this little tiny group of people managed to fight off all these hordes. The Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Syrians, they all came in, and they all lost their ass. And what happened, Israel took the surrounding territories that were once theirs. Gaza, the Golan Heights. I forgot what the other one is. They signed a peace treaty when Carter was president with the Egyptians and the Jordanians. So they always have this thing, land for peace, land for... The Israelis will never give up the Golan Heights, because the Golan Heights are high ground. You don't want your enemy on high ground where they can rain terror down. It's a basic rule of warfare. They will never give up the Golan Heights. It's called the Heights for a reason. Islam will try to conquer wherever it steps its foot. It does not exist in peace with any other doctrine. It does not exist in peace with Hinduism. It does not exist in peace with Buddhism, Christianity. They don't exist in peace with each other, because you got the Shiites and the Sunnis fighting for control. And regardless of where they are in the world, the ends justify the means. People need to understand this. This bullshit that comes out of Hollywood about Islam being beautiful, it's garbage, and it's not true. Here is the problem with Islam. There is no separation of church and state. There is no secularism within Islam. It doesn't exist. It's a theocracy. Islam and the government are tied together. And what you have in Iran is a theocracy. Islam is run by the Quran, and it's run by the mullahs and the ayatollahs, who are the clergy. That's what ISIS was about. It was about establishing a caliphate, a giant Islamic state like the Ottoman Empire once was. You're never going to have secular Islam. It doesn't exist. And I promise you, in the future, in this country, it's going to cause problems, because it causes problems everywhere you go, because Islam will not submit to anything else. It will not adapt to anything else, because Islam is all is Islam. Because Allah's will is more important than individuals' free will. And that's what you need to know about this. Don't believe the bullshit that comes out of Hollywood when they start talking about this nonsense. Look in your history books. Look at all the things. We have nothing but recorded history on Islamic wars going back to 600 AD. The Crusades and how they invaded Europe. It was the Poles that ended up saving Europe. The Poles saved Europe eventually. If it wasn't for the Poles, all of Europe would probably be Islamic now. The Spaniards kicked them out. You are going to have a huge problem in the future. You can't get away with it. There is never going to be peace in the Middle East. That's never going to exist. My point of making this is, you can hate Trump. I don't care if somebody hates Trump. But you cannot run in fear of Islam, and you cannot live in peace with Islam. The best case scenario when it comes to Islam is to keep it where the hell it's established and let it stay there. But with liberals, they don't think about this. They think it's a beautiful religion. They will go after Christians because Christians aren't inclusive and accepting. And Christian, do you think Islam endorses abortion? Do you think Islam endorses homosexuality, gender fluidity? All the nonsense the liberals embrace, Islam does not accept any of that. None of it. None of it. You don't hear it talked about, but it's the truth. And they don't raise their heads and talk about it. The Islamists will not raise their heads out of their foxholes until there's so many of them that they are a powerhouse to be reckoned with. They only stick their heads up when there's enough of them to cover each other's backs. And that's when the problems begin. It's part of the plan. It's part of how things are done. It's part of Islam. Anywhere Islam puts its foot, it takes it over. India was once bigger. The British had to divide it the northern part into Pakistan because of all the trouble that they caused with the Hindus. China, right now, has got internment camps for any of the people in their country that are Islamists. They have re-indoctrination, re-education camps, we used to call them. It's coming down. It's going to happen. And I don't think the future is going to be good because people do not know history. They don't pay attention. And that's just the way it is. I'm not advocating violence against anybody. There should never be. But there's going to come a time when the Islamists are not going to sit around and be peaceful anymore. That time is going to come. You will see it happen in Europe first. Mark my words.